Hi, my name is Brandon. I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery, and today I'm reading again from The Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer. Last few days, we've been talking about the soul, the spirit, and some of the limitations that we put on ourselves in our experience of the world around us. Today, we're going to talk some about the origins of that. Why do we encounter all of the psychological, all of the spiritual difficulties that we encounter in life in the modern age? And so what he says is during eons of evolution, from the simplest of living forms to the most complex, there has always been the day-to-day struggle to protect oneself. In our highly evolved cooperative social structures, this survival instinct has gone through evolutionary changes. Many of us no longer lack food, water, clothing, or shelter, nor do we regularly face life-threatening physical danger. As a result, the protective energies have adapted toward defending the individual psychologically rather than physiologically. We now experience the daily need to defend our self-concepts rather than our bodies. Our major struggles end up being with our own inner fears, insecurities, and destructive behavior patterns, and not with outside forces. So basically, what he's saying is that, as human beings evolved during the early days and in the majority of the life of human beings, the same food that you had to go out and catch every day in order to eat that day could also potentially kill you. So when we were in that mindset, we had a lot of different worries on our minds. And now that we don't have that same problem, there are certainly people in this world who don't know where their next meal is coming from. But in many situations, they don't have to worry that going and finding that next meal, that meal could actually kill them. And so we're in the point that he's trying to make is that we're in a very different situation than the situation that we evolved into, and our society has evolved in a much faster way than our own psychological mechanisms have evolved. And so even though we don't live in a world where we need this daily fear and where we have the need to protect ourselves so much from the environment around us, we still have those drives within us. So he says, nonetheless, the same impulses that make a deer run away urge you to run away. Sometimes somebody raises their voice at you or talks about an uncomfortable subject. These are not physically threatening circumstances, yet your heart starts pumping a little faster. So you get into all these circumstances where you are not physically threatened, and yet your fight or flight response gets triggered. So someone gets upset with you. Like this happens to me at work. My boss might get upset with me about something. And I find myself in a fight or flight response. My heart starts racing. I start trying to decide, do I just say okay and go along with this, or do I try to defend myself, and I have all these conflicting feelings, and I get really, really anxious. And that is not an appropriate response in that situation. I'm not under any kind of significant threat in that situation. In fact, more than likely, the most helpful thing I can do in that situation is to stay calm and cool and collected and respond honestly to what's happening around me, and just do the right thing. What's the right thing? Tell the truth, be ready to improve if someone points out something to me that I can improve on. But that's not what we typically do. We typically get all agitated, and that's that fight or flight response kicking on in moments where we really don't need it. to kick on. You need that response to kick on when the bear that you've been hunting all of a sudden turns around and sees you. That's when that response is helpful. It's not helpful when your boss finds an error in something you've done and confronts you about it. You don't need the fight or flight response for that. You actually need to engage with your boss and figure out what's going on, because more than likely you can improve for next time. So he goes on to say the problem is that part of you that gets disturbed is way out of balance. It's so sensitive that the slightest little thing causes it to overreact. You are living on a planet spinning around in the middle of outer space, and you're either worrying about your blemishes, the scratch on your new car, or the fact that you burped in public. It's not healthy. If your physical body were that sensitive, you would say you were sick. But our society considers psychological sensitivities normal, because most of us don't have to worry about food, clothing, or shelter. We have the luxury of worrying about a spot on our pants, or laughing too loud, or saying something wrong. Because we've developed this hypersensitive psyche, we constantly use our energies to close around it and protect ourselves. But this process only hides the problems. It doesn't fix them. You're locking your illness inside yourself, and it will only get worse. So we protect ourselves and we hide things inside. And this is why for people in recovery who are going through 12 steps programs, the act of uncovering everything, of shedding a light on all the wreckage of our past in step 4 is so critical. And other recovery programs have similar steps in the process, where you are really just unpacking everything that you've protected all your life. And this is common in regular therapy for anybody who has been holding things in, who has been taking things in and just holding on to them. It's important to get that out, to talk about it, and to shed some light on things. And so because the point that he makes is you will get to a point in your growth where you understand that if you protect yourself, you will never be free. So the more that we protect ourselves, the more closed off we are to the world around us. We think we're protecting ourselves, but we're actually imprisoning ourselves. And it's not allowing us to experience the world. If we've got a lot of hurt, then putting ourselves in a psychological prison doesn't allow us to heal from that hurt. So we think that we are protecting ourselves in a way that's going to allow us to continue going through life without experiencing that same hurt again. But we're actually opening ourselves up to a whole new kind of hurt that's guaranteed, because we're being held inside this self-implemented prison that we've created. And it's very important for us to realize that we got to open ourselves up in order to experience life, and in order to get the healing we need to experience it on a level where we no longer feel the need to constantly protect ourselves. So there's a lot more on this that I'm going to get into tomorrow. Wanted to introduce this first part and these concepts about why our psychological fight or flight and this sensitivity we have to the world around us exists. It exists for a very good reason evolutionarily, but in our day-to-day world, as you go through the day-to-day, look at where you have a difficult time making decisions, or look at the places where you get anxious, and then take a step back and say, is my well-being protected by this anxiety? Am I giving myself further chance at survival through this anxiety? Because that's why that anxiety developed. It developed because it was a survival mechanism. Getting anxious when you hear When you're wandering through the woods and you hear a stick crack behind you, getting anxious and your brain switching on and saying, hey, what am I going to do about this? That was important when that was a regular part of our daily lives. But that's not part of our daily lives anymore. Not for most people. And so we've got to become familiar with those mechanisms, put them in the right context so that we can really figure out, am I still engaging in this kind of protective behavior in a way that's really hurting me more than it's protecting me. And so tomorrow we'll get into more of explanation about this, as well as looking, how do we start to pick this apart, and how do we start to peel away the layers of protection we've put on ourselves in order to really experience the world. In the meantime, hope you all have a great day, and I will see you back here tomorrow with more.